Hello and welcome back to Kirloskar Vasudhara International Film Festivals. You've been following the very critical issues of water security for India. We looked at how climate change is going to affect India's water security in the first part, and in the next part, we looked at groundwater as a question for India's water security. Today, we have with us Kalpana Tai Salunke, Prasad Sevikari, Vijay Paranspe, and Dr. Himanshu Kulkarni, who will take us through the issues of water governance. Do we have to go towards decentralized governance or do we have to have more centralized governance for India? We will discuss such issues and talk about the effect of large dams on India's water security. So, do join us in this another interesting episode on India's water security. At one extreme, we have extreme centralization, which is the large dam policy, and which I know Mr. Paranspe has been talking a lot about. At the other extreme is the extreme decentralization of water use in terms of groundwater, which is your subject. Somewhere in between lies the farmer, and especially the marginal farmers who are out of the command areas of water. So, this question is addressed to all three of you. What needs to be done in policy measures about centralized decision making in water and decentralized decision making in water, and of course all the gray area which lies in between?
The centralization of the decision making and the decentralized availability as well as using pattern of the water, actually there is lot of the vision has to be on the river basin, as Vijayji pointed out, that even the interstate and all that, but ultimately the watershed should be the unit of planning and action. And taluka place, that should be the decentralized uh, unit for implementation, governance, as well as water use. Then only I think we can reach, and it will be an inclusive development. Because today, in spite of having maximum number of dams in Maharashtra, only 17 to 20% area is getting the benefit of that huge investment, and the rest of the area is depending upon groundwater and local conservation resources. So I think watershed is a very important unit, because again we are talking about taluka. Even in Purandar taluka there are three sections. One is the water generating area, the second is the water using area next to the river, and the ridge line on the eastern side, which receives very less rain, and there is no almost very drought area. So, if we want to address the problem at the micro level, then we have to start. We have to have the vision, as you correctly pointed out, for the whole river and the whole
Basin
system,
approach, yeah.
about the whole basin. But the action and the regulation and the accountability needs to be established at the taluka level.
At the watershed level, I
And
think this is
watershed.
a very interesting point, working on the basin level while not disregarding the watershed level, which brings me to Dr. Himanshu. How would you say that the decentralized use of groundwater is affecting the overall water condition in area, and what could be the policies ahead for that?
Well, let me begin by saying that the answer to our water governance problem lies in decentralization. I think in some ways the groundwater story, although looking scary, has answered many of these centralized versus decentralized questions. For one, all our entire policy thinking is a very top-down, regulatory heavy thinking. I mean, we always come back to the question of regulating and legislating and laws. I mean, let me take a slight diversion on a lighter comparison. We have traffic laws in India. If I walk out of this place and I'm a pedestrian, and if I have to cross the next signal, what happens? What's the risk I face? it's a metaphor which is similar to what happens to the most marginal, smallest farmer, which is who is actually the answer to your food security. So, how do you ensure water security to your most productive element, the most productive element of this democracy? And if you try and answer that question, then a whole new world opens up. What does a farmer need today? Let's begin with that. And I think what a farmer needs today is a little bit of a support in terms of what's going to happen to his or her water, what are the returns a farmer will get in terms of the crops that they grow. So, there are very deep seated questions. I am not going into those, but I think the answer lies in a democratic sort of solution or approach which looks at a participatory community based means of managing groundwater at the grassroots, whether it's urban India, whether it's rural India. And I think the advantage of participation and cooperation lies in the fact that it is only through cooperation and participation that you can bring science, and by science I mean a transdisciplinary sense of science, not just engineering or hydrology, but also aspects like sociology, economics, psychology. If you want these facets to bear fruit on the ground and make a difference to how we manage our resources, I think we have to take all of this, first and foremost, take all our education, take all our expertise out of the ivory towers or the ivory towers of academia and the glass towers of governance. And I think unless and until we take all of this to where the problem lies and where the solutions are needed, we won't be able to develop any kind of water governance system. So, what do you do at the central level? At the central level, I think we need a more facilitative, catalyzing system rather than a top-down, regulatory, a regulation-bound psychology. Command and control. So, I think moving away from command and control can get us there. I actually want to close this discussion because Kalpana Tai is here and Vijay is here as well. For me, Elinor Ostrom's 1990 work, Governing the Commons, fades a lot. Even after I read this, I spoke to Elinor about this, fades in comparison to what the Pani Panchayats were doing in the 1970s. And one of the big challenges that we face, I think it's a global challenge, but more so in India, is how do we de-link land and water rights? How do we get to the problem of entitlements? Because unless we address the problem of entitlements, water rights, we won't be able to address the problem of allocation, and because we are not addressing the problem of allocation, we won't be able to look at governance. So, we have examples, we have a lot of examples in India, and of course, these examples have also grown have evolved in terms of their robustness, in terms of the problems they try to address. And I think it's really at the grassroots that we need to look for solutions, rather than looking for solutions in Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, or Chennai, or Bengaluru. I think it's really the grassroots which are telling us things. There's a phenomenal amount of cooperation amongst farmers. We don't see it. I think addressing the question of competition and conflict on water, especially groundwater, is possible only if we get people to cooperate around water.
I think you put it quite lucidly. So, Dr. Vijay Paranjpe, you have always talked about large dams and what their impacts are. So, if you could tell us something about that to our audiences.
The age of large dams is now over, because the rate at which the costs of dams have been increasing in the last 2 decades, you will find that the number of dams started or completed has dramatically fallen. So, large dams, whether there are opposition people or not, is going to fall. It has already fallen. So, I would not worry about that at all at the moment, because we simply do not have the wherewithal to have more large dams. But let me come to the resilience part. You increase the resilience of the small farmer by giving him information and knowledge. Unfortunately, all the knowledge and information that we have is either classified, that means it is not allowed to be released, or it is stated in such a fashion that it is not available to the farmer. So, demystification of all this knowledge which will empower him. So, one is cooperation, of course, and that we have been trying for a long time, but it is the easier said than done. Give him the information and he will start cooperating. So, producers do not cooperate unless they know that cooperation is beneficial. So, you give them information about how cooperation will become beneficial, then alone, whether they are producers or consumers, they will start cooperating. This is one thing about cooperation. The other is about scale. You mentioned that there are large dams and there are one village and therefore, there is a gap. I would say that the watershed is the level at which planning which he is talking about, that means if you want to do groundwater planning and surface water planning and make all this information available to the farmers and also make the market information available to the farmers, then watershed is the best unit, because it is neither large dam nor is it Da Gavat's 10 village small enclave. So, what we have is let us say 30,000 or 40,000 hectares of land where there is a fair amount of agriculture, and people understand and are able to get a feel of what and who they are cooperating with. If we say river basin, it is too huge. If we say one gaon, too much politics. So, you have to have a scale at which, and this is a very nice scale, the watersheds. And the watersheds in India have been, so all the groundwork and the academic work has been done. Now, how do we get this across to the farmer, make him more resilient? None of the villagers know how to read for instance, the rainfall in the simplest of. So, if each village has its own water gauging station or the rain gauging station, each village has a river gauging station if there is a river close by, then all this basic information becomes available. Each farmer can easily get the levels of his groundwater. These are not difficult things, but this is what we can do. So, instead of solving their problem, you make it enable, these are enabling instruments. So, you make them able to take their own decisions and succeed, rather than trying to make them succeed by doing something for them. So, this enabling grounds right now do not exist, we need to create them. Last point about disasters. We talk of disasters as unitary things. I divide disasters into two parts. First part is not a disaster. For example, a glacier crashing at Rishi Ganga is just a natural phenomenon. That we were stupid enough to build structures in the middle of that valley, that we did not take them to the high flood line, that we built even though it was a not so large dam right in the middle, and we built all these stupidities create the disaster. So, the crashing of the glacier is not the disaster. Let us understand that. Whether it is drought, the drought itself is a natural phenomenon. Floods are natural phenomena. How we deal with them, convert it either into a disaster or a simple thing. A simple example, same magnitude earthquake in Japan and the same magnitude earthquake in India, what happens? Because they have not been stupid enough to come in the way and build the wrong things, less fatalities. In our case, all our urban planning is such that we break all the rules and therefore we have thousands of people dead. So, the phenomena is not to blame. The flood coming in is not to blame. The drought is not to blame. The way we have responded to it, made the wrong choices, come in its way, "Aa bel mujhe maar," is the reason why we convert natural phenomena into disasters.
And I think the founding principle that our traditional water management systems had was that the beneficiaries would be the decision makers. And so a bad decision is going to affect them, and a good decision is also going to affect them. And that's where I think the large dam and the watershed management area dialogue should actually kind of look at in that perspective.
I would like to point out that policy level, what they should decide. In a country and in a state like Maharashtra, where the per capita availability of water is 1,500 cubic meter, and if we are, which is already a stress condition, and if we are exporting the sugar and the grapes and whatever requires more water, banana, from and taking that as an opportunity for the agricultural development, that is a flaw. We have to decide that within our resources, whatever are available, what is the sustainable output for that particular unit, and then how we can make it more effective. The second thing, what the farmer needs is, along with the knowledge, they need basic infrastructure. There are two examples. Israel, when they were deciding about their policy, they said that we will import water from the other countries when we are doing the agricultural export and import. The second thing about Japan and even China, what they have done, they have provided the infrastructure. In Japan, the farms are very small, but irrigation, drainage and transportation, everything is provided at the farmer's end, and that is why their productivity is highest in the world. What we have given our farmers?
None of these.
No infrastructure, no proper, now even for the watershed development, at a policy level, what you have to decide, that this is the total water available in this particular watershed, so the use will not exceed that. So how it can be done? You change the cropping pattern, you make assured protective irrigation. As I pointed out that there are more than 3 weeks dry spell, then the rain-fed agriculture is totally lost. So providing protective irrigation, and that is why in Pani Panchayat we say that make assured 5,000 cubic meter water per family, either from the unit itself, or if the unit is deficit, bring it out from the big structures which you have invested so much on. And unless this is done, I think the agriculture is not going to, because at present we are doing many things, but they are lacking in a focused and development.
And I think that's a point well made, because what large dams showed us is that we can borrow water from any watershed. And then you can be frivolous about the water availability within your watershed. This has been one of the most interesting discussions which I have been a part of, which kind of integrated urban problems, rural problems and groundwater problems together with the larger problem that everyone is facing, that of climate change. So I would like just to thank each one of them, and
Yes.
over to you now.
Yes, thank you to the panelists. But I must say that with the discussions, we have discussed the problems, but it is quite scary of what's been happening. And I feel that we have just scratched the surface with all this discussion. And we need to know a lot more of this. And hopefully we can do more discussions on the same subject. Thank you so much for being a part of this and joining us for this discussion.
Thank you.